As Naruto fans, we're all used to seeing characters who have special powers like the various dojutsu to a point where nobody is ever truly shocked when they learn that a character has one. In fact, it's gotten to a point where when a character like Ishiki pops up with an eye nobody saw before, it's just accepted, and nobody thinks twice. It took the series 4 years to reveal. It's called the Kokugan. However, despite this and despite Naruto as a series having been around for decades now, there is still some questions regarding the different dojutsu that exist, like the one we're going to answer in today's newest Naruto Explained video, which is the answer as to why Nagato couldn't use Madara's Sharingan, and most importantly, why couldn't Nagato use Madara's Rinnegan specific power, the Limbo Jutsu. So the questions themselves, they aren't bad ones to ask. At some point, pretty much every Naruto fan, they have asked them at one point or another when reading or watching Naruto for the first time. As we all know, Nagato's Rinnegan isn't actually Nagato's Rinnegan, it's really Madara's Rinnegan, with Madara transplanting the Rinnegan into Nagato's eyes at some point before the start of the Ninja War, the second Ninja War, choosing him specifically because he's an Uzumaki and his body can handle the chakra strain that comes from the use of the eyes. So the common question is, since Madara awakened the Rinnegan and the Sharingan was a set of eyes that Madara had before, then why can't Nagato use them? 1 + 1 should equal 2, right? So the knee-jerk reaction is to think that there shouldn't be a problem to switch back and forth between the eyes, given that we've seen some like Danzo use Shisui's Mangekyo's Sharingan power, Kotomatsukami, and then use the same Sharingan as a regular Sharingan. We've seen Kakashi switch between Obito's Mangekyo and his regular Sharingan, so why is the Rinnegan any different? Well, it's pretty simple when you take a look at the lore, and it's pretty easy to overlook the explanation, though the deeper you think into this, the more complicated it is going to get. So let's just keep it simple for now. When we look at the way that transplants work for eyes in the Naruto franchise, it is implied that someone like Nagato, they wouldn't be able to revert the eye back to its basic stage since we've seen it with the Sharingan, and so this should apply with the Rinnegan eye itself. That's why Obito, who flat out said to Sakura when waiting for her to destroy the Rinnegan that just using one Rinnegan eye, it was too much for him to endure because the chakra in that eye nearly drove him insane. If the chakra was too much, Obito could have simply reverted the eye back to the standard Sharingan, which his body is naturally better accustomed to use since biologically he's already an Uchiha, and he had the added benefit of having Hashirama cells, which gives him another stamina boost. In fact, just taking a step further, Obito knows that every Mangekyo Sharingan has its own unique ability. He trained with Madara for a year, so in theory, he should know that at least one of Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan powers are, which would give extra incentive to switch the Rinnegan off and to use it when he needed to, and then use the extra Sharingan for battle and use Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan power. Like for instance, if you think Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan power was Limbo, that really could have came in handy when fighting against Naruto, B, Kakashi, and Guy. There's nothing that prevents someone from using another Mangekyo Sharingan power, even if they have a whole other dojutsu in their eye, which as we saw when Madara stole Kakashi's eye. Madara, he had the Rinnegan, which was his own dojutsu that was originally a Sharingan, and he also had Kakashi's Sharingan, which can use Kamui, and he still used it. In fact, he went from 3 Tomo to Mangekyo specifically for that reason. The fact that Obito never attempted this and was never implied or even mentioned he could use any of Madara's powers is yet another sign that this is possible. When an eye is transplanted while in its final or strongest state, there is no reverting back to the weaker state. That stays consistent for the majority of the series in regards to transplants. There is always a price to pay for using a transplanted power that is given to you, or in some cases it is taken by you. You cannot undo that dojutsu. With dojutsu transplants, due to the eye not belonging to the user, there are certain drawbacks that are written in stone that can't be avoided. For instance, look at Kakashi, who we have seen multiple times and heard him say multiple times. The usage of the Sharingan, it eats away an enormous chunk of his chakra, and by extension, so too does his stamina take a hit, to a point that in order to effectively use the Sharingan, Kakashi has to not only keep the eye covered up because it is always active, but he also has to be mindful of his chakra levels because he has a certain amount of chakra that he has to set aside in order to use it. This is because the eye, it is not his own. He cannot deactivate the eye, even if he wanted to, because if he would have had that ability, he would have done so. The same is true when we look at the elite Jonin from the Hidden Mist village, Ao, who possessed the Byakugan, and he too, like Kakashi, possessed a dojutsu that was transplanted into his eye. And like Kakashi, he had to keep it covered up at all times due to how the Byakugan works. He could at least activate the eye, as we saw in the 5 Kage summit, but he also keeps a patch over the eye. However, you might be going, wait a second, he's got a transplant, so he shouldn't be able to cut the eye on and off. But the story, it has indirectly provided us a couple of answers for this. So Ao has a few measures that have appeared to be taken to deal with this specific problem that look like they're very specific to the Hidden Mist village. So the first is that he has talismans that are on his ears that aren't for decoration. They have seals on them that react whenever the Byakugan is in danger by someone else or himself. He also has a seal that is placed above his Byakugan, which prevents it from being taken. And this part is merely conjecture, but it seems as if it also allows him to cut the eye on and off between the seal and the eye patch containing bits of his own chakra that are used to suppress the Byakugan and stop it from being stolen. That would totally explain it. That brings us to the next part, which is if there is an exception to the Byakugan, then is there one for the Rinnegan? And the answer, it is implied to be kind of sort of yes. There are rules that are set in stone for the Rinnegan here. So Madara, the person who is the rightful owner of said Rinnegan, was shown switching back and forth between his eyes at more than one point in the series. Like for instance in the manga, when he first comes out as an Edo Tensei and is shown advancing through his eyes as he battles the Shinobi Alliance, he eventually cuts on the Rinnegan to absorb Naruto's Rasen Shuriken. Also, when you go to Madara's battle with the 5 Kage, Madara specifically at one point switches his Mangekyo Sharingan on, so deactivates the Rinnegan to use the Mangekyo Sharingan. Also, he can place the 4th Raikage under Genjutsu. This shows us that with the normal Rinnegan, you cannot use the Mangekyo Sharingan powers of the original eye, so the basic Mangekyo Sharingan powers, when the Rinnegan is active. The only person who has ever been shown being able to do that is Sasuke, but Sasuke's Rinnegan is not a normal Rinnegan, and this is for a couple of reasons. The first is due to the fact that his Rinnegan was specifically gifted to him by the Sage of Six Paths, according to the 4th Naruto data book, which is why he got the eye so quickly after getting Ashura's chakra via Hashirama cells, and it didn't take him decades like it took Madara to deactivate the eye. Sasuke's Rinnegan also has the Sharingan Tomo in the eyes, which further explains why Sasuke can use Sharingan Genjutsu like we saw when he used Genjutsu on the Nine-Tailed Beast and used his Mangekyo Sharingan power of that eye as well. To further build on this, Sasuke, due to the Rinnegan being given to him by Hagoromo, he also has never been shown deactivating the Rinnegan. As we see in Naruto volumes 70 and 71 and 72, whenever his chakra reaches a low point, he needs to close his eye in order to recharge. Very consistent with how Kakashi and Ao would keep their dojutsu cover when they weren't using it, and it's specifically because Sasuke cannot cut off his eye. If it stays visible, he is consuming chakra, and when he overuses it, like we see in Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage and the Scarlet Spring, if he uses it too much, the Tomo and the Rinnegan, they will vanish. But to learn more about this subject matter, I refer you to the video I have on why Sasuke is always out of chakra, since the rest of that info explaining that is irrelevant to this topic. So that brings us back to Nagato and not being able to use the Sharingan or the Mangekyo Sharingan powers of Madara, despite having both of Madara's Rinnegan, which were originally Sharingan. Looking at the totality of the evidence, it's pretty easy to draw a straight line that if Madara cannot use the basic Sharingan powers with his Rinnegan, or the special Mangekyo Sharingan power that is unique to his Rinnegan when the Rinnegan is active, but instead he has to switch back and forth between the eyes, then it would be very logical to deduce that that would also apply to Nagato as well. However, with Nagato not being the rightful owner of the eyes, he can't access them. As for the Susanoo, I know some of you guys are probably asking questions about that, since, hey, he's got 2 Rinnegan in his eyes, and those Rinnegan, they were originally Sharingan, and those Sharingan are why he could use the Susanoo. So here's the thing. The reason why you never saw Nagato use Susanoo also goes back to some oft-forgotten lore. People often confuse the fact that you need both Mangekyo Sharingan to have awakened with your chakra that's inside of your your eyes in order to awaken the Susanoo. And this is not true. And it's not true for a couple reasons. The first is that we have examples in the Ninja Escapades OVA that Masashi Kishimoto wrote the story for, where Shisui uses it against Danzo's Anbu. And then we have Madara in the manga who literally uses a full body Susanoo briefly, despite literally having no eyes in his body at the time. You also have to take into consideration what Tobirama said. So Tobirama, when he's explaining how the Mangekyo Sharingan is activated, etc., one of the things that he talks about is how the chakra specifically comes from the brain. So this would not apply to someone like Nagato, who never awakened said Rinnegan of his own. It was always there, but it was not his chakra that awakened any of the Mangekyo Sharingan stuff. By everything that we've seen, the third Mangekyo Sharingan power, specifically the Susanoo, it is tied to that chakra that is awakening your brain. And you can use that chakra avatar of Susanoo without both eyes, but you need both eyes there in order to stabilize it. This is shown given the fact that Shisui and Madara, both of their Susanos broke apart shortly after using them. When Sasuke's eyes began to go blind when he fought against Kakashi, his Susanoo destabilized because there was no light in his eyes. And even with Itachi's Susanoo quickly dissipated and destabilized once all the light was left out of Itachi's Sharingan. So by extension, Nagato should not be able to use any of these powers. However, there is one hiccup here in the lore, and it's disingenuous for me to not point any of this out. And sadly, this is something very common when you have long-running series, which is there tends to be some oversights that are made, and eventually they are fixed via soft retcon. So if you recall, we said earlier in the video that the Rinnegan was transplanted into Nagato when he was a child by Madara before the second Ninja War began. Nagato would awaken the Rinnegan on two separate occasions in the manga. Once when his parents died, and the other time when Yahiko was attacked. And in the former, he was able to switch the eye back to normal. After that traumatic experience, his parents died, he awakened the Rinnegan, killed the Leaf Ninja, and then his eyes went back to normal. That directly goes in the face of everything that we've had established in the series so far, which is that once a external transplant is given to you, then it stays active for good. There are two schools of thought here that explain this and why Madara would have chosen a young child with high chakra reserves from the Uzumaki bloodline. The first is that it goes back to how dojutsu work, where the awakenings, as we learned from Tobirama, come from the chemical shift in the brain, which leads to the chakra flooding the optic nerves of the eyes. It's possible that the trauma he experienced, it awakened the eye, and somehow he was able to do what Sasuke did after the Uchiha massacre, which is awaken the Sharingan and never remember it. The same as how Kakashi never knew he awakened the Mangekyo after he killed Rin until he was in his early 30s. And Sarada didn't know that she awakened the Sharingan when she was a toddler, according to Sakura in the Boruto anime adaptation of Naruto Gaiden, the Seventh Hokage, and the Scarlet Spring. Now, the other answer here is the more likely one, in that this was just an oversight and Kishimoto just used a soft retcon via Tobirama's statements to basically link sadness and sorrow as a way to clean all this information up. It's one of the many problems that people have with the last 30 volumes of Naruto, myself included. Things such as this and the age of Kakashi when he graduated the academy, they were retconned during the last few years of publication in the manga. That happens with long-running series. That's the one hang-up that you do have, because Nagato did, for unnamed reasons, show he could turn the Rinnegan off when he was a child, and he awakened it first, but the fact he never did so again more so lines up with the traditional rules that we have regarding transplants and externally received dojutsu. So Kakashi getting Obito Sharingan, and when it comes to externally received dojutsu, that will be, say, Sasuke getting the Rinnegan from Hagoromo. I know it's really easy to say, hey man, Kishimoto just forgot, or hey man, Nagato never knew that the Rinnegan was in his eyes, so who knows, maybe if he did know, he could have used the Sharingan because the guy was a genius. I don't discount that, because even Konan was shocked when she learned that the Rinnegan wasn't Nagato's, but I wanted to try and give you an answer that used this information that was readily available in universe and not venture too much into conjecture and headcanon, but to learn more about Naruto lore that doesn't have conjecture. You want to click here on the right for this Naruto Explain video, or you want to click here to watch my newest anime explain video, where over on that channel I discuss non-Naruto content.